It is the Rotoballer PGA show, and we are back for our final major of the year. Unfortunately, very sad, bittersweet stuff. But as always, when we have a major, we have our major guest, who is Keith Stewart, sitting in the middle of us, looking dapper in his blazer. Mr. Keith Stewart, how are you today?
Byron, I'm fantastic. It's great once again to be with you guys. A tradition unlike any other. Forget the Masters. Monday nights, Rotoballer, major prep work. Let's do it. I love it.
Let's go. Happy to have you with us, and I'm sure Spencer is too. Spence, what's cooking on your side of the mold?
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have Keith on to do this show with us. The amount of information that he brings, I tell him this every single time he's on with us. It's information that you're not going to get anywhere else. And that's what's so exciting about you coming on with us. So thank you for joining us, Keith. I think we're going to have a really interesting tournament to talk about. As you said, Byron, it's the last major championship of the year. A lot of interesting bullet points, though, entering this week for a handful of players that we're going to be talking about at the top of the board, and then some names that maybe were higher or lower on underneath that.
Yes, we're going to have some interesting names, and I've done some prep on the stuff, and our rankings are quite interesting. So we're going to have some fun names to chat about inside the top 10 there. Going to do some gourmet cray-cray after that, kind of going through the tiers and just chatting about everything that's going on this week. So Keith, since you are our wonderful guest on the show tonight, tell us from a high-level perspective, what exactly are you kind of keying in for this week at the Open Championship?
I think I'm going to key on three things. And that would be from an approach perspective, it's almost sort of a split personality. I need a guy that can scramble very well and hit a lot of interesting wedge shots inside of 100 yards and then also be a good player over 200 yards. I want somebody who can putt on slow greens or has proven they could putt in the Open Championship or the Scottish Open. So somebody that can lag putt or approach putt, however you want to phrase that. And then the third thing is that somebody that can game plan the driver. So it just doesn't necessarily mean that they need to bomb away, but somebody who has the acumen to kind of build themselves a successful strategy to get through those first 6 holes, manage the twistabout that is the next 6, and then coming back in, find a way to hit those fairways when the driver is definitely in play, and then finish this thing off with some class. So those would be the 3 things that I'm really cued in on.
I love it. From one Lindeque to a cued in Keith. Keith, Spencer, what are you queuing in on for this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short. I think Keith mostly mentioned everything that's noteworthy here. The only thing that I'll add to that is you do have, if you look at this tournament from when it was last played here, when Henrik Stenson won, you do have some slight deviations to this course. 9 holes have received brand new tee boxes. That's added over 200 yards to the property. I think that distance is really noteworthy in my mind for all the reasons that Keith just talked about. You have thick rough and fairway bunkers. That's going to be the course's, or at least one of the course's best defenses that it has against that bomb and gouge mentality. Players really truly experience a 1-stroke penalty for wayward drives off the tee. That includes gorse bushes that come into play if you miss to the wrong angle. All of that's going to highlight the importance of finding the short grass, but it's not as if these fairway lies are always going to be perfect either. You have undulation that comes into play throughout. That accentuates this strategic link style approach. It's a thinking man's course. Every link style property, whether it is more of your American style one or more of your European style one, and I would say this one is, here's where I want to be careful with making too many extrapolations out from what we've seen in the past. There's a lot of trends we can talk about. We can talk about how outside of Henrik's victory, most of these tournaments have been won at this property over the last 60 years between 10 and 13 under. We can talk about outside of Henrik's victory, most of these have been won by Americans. I don't know how much I necessarily want to pinpoint into those factors, just because we do have a different course here. You add 200 yards to a property that I think was already one of the more challenging ones on the open rotation, specifically when you look through different spectrums of the course. Like, it's that first part that Keith was talking about where you have some birdie making opportunities mixed in with some of your harder holes. And then it's a really difficult closing stretch that you have to encounter. So you're going to have a game plan here. This is not one of those properties where you just show up and you bomb away and hope everything goes well. And there's a certain Open Championship sort of player. And, you know, I don't know if we want to take this as a segue, and I'll let you talk, Byron, about what you think about the course. But like, if you look at the number 10 player in my model that I'm going to talk about, who just so happens to be your boy here, Byron. Like that Open Championship mentality is exactly what I'm looking for out of my players this week.
As in guys that can go super low, Spence?
As in guys that have the ability to think outside of the box.
Okay.
As in guys who have the ability to scramble and shot make in not the most opportune positions. Guys that don't necessarily take a one game plan track mind with it and just go rogue in that area and think that you can get away with it. Like there are a lot of nuanced situations with this property that if you're just going and you're not taking into account everything that's happening, you can run into some really big problems on this course.
Yeah. I'm a little concerned about my boy, but for me, as always, I'm using strokes gain data from the previous majors because I want everyone on the same playing field. I want everyone who's playing majors to have used that data. That's how I'm rolling. And if I'm betting someone to win this tournament, they have to have finished second or first in a major prior to this in order for me to bet them to win, because the Open Championship and the Masters have an 80% clip of winners that have finished second or first in the prior major since 2012. So it's literally just first and seconds, just nonstop in the Open Championship. You have to have had a top two for me. So that's short and simple for me there. Anything else you want to touch on, Keith, that you were listening to while we were doing this?
No, let's just get into it. I mean, we always run long on time, so I'm not going to start that issue yet.
I love this expeditionary situation you've got going here for us. Jim, I don't have too much rain. I'm kind of just showing you guys what these guys are in store for this week. This is the Bobby Mack dress code. So I'm going to move my face so you can't see my ugly face while we got the comments up. And we're going to start with our first few guys in the top of the board here. So Mr. Keith, talk to us about your number 10 ranked golfer, Tony Finau.
I love Tony this week for a ton of different reasons. Number one is that he's completely turned around his year. You know, he started off the year very, very fickle in all that Finau was doing. And now all of a sudden, he's got 5 starts in a row, nothing worse than a top 18 finish, 2 of those of which are major championships. And most of all, he's got the putter working. I think he's gained positively with the putter in his last 3. And now you take that over to the Open Championship. And one of the things that I definitely feel like you have to have is positive Open experience or Scottish Open experience, or you have to have played over there and had some level of success. Because when you get put into this meat grinder that is a major championship, you've got to call upon something in your mind that says, hey, I could win over here. I could take care of business and go grab and capture that claret jug. And Tony, he's had 7 starts over here, 6 of which have been a top 30 finish. The flat trajectory with which he hits the golf ball, a completely underrated short game, which Finau has, especially off of short grass. And you're telling me that the greens are slower, and lately he's been gaining positively with the putter. All of those factors and more. And, I mean, could you think of a better story? You know, I'm not going to go back to Bobby Mack because that one's a little bit of sour grapes for me. But I will say this much. That is a tremendous story in all of golf for that guy to win the Scottish Open in his home country, right? I think a lot of people would feel good if Finau were to capture the claret jug. So he sits at number 10 for me, and I feel good about it.
I love it, Keith. I'm surprised we don't have Spencer with Tony Finau inside the top 10. I'm sure he is brimming with glee over there, but he'll chat about my boy, Cameron Smith. And I have Cameron Smith actually ranked higher than Spencer, but I figured I would let Spencer do the talking about Cameron Smith to provide a bipartisan opinion on my boy.
Very abnormal ranking for me with Cameron Smith. Like we had this discussion at the US Open and I had him outside of my top 40. And I was a pretty big proponent in all of those situations that Cam Smith was one of the best fade options on the board. I took him on multiple times from an in-tournament betting perspective. Got Morikawa against him, got Fleetwood against him. Like all these names that I'm going to like again this week. But the one difference with Cameron Smith with the way that I built my model, and I think it goes into a lot of what Keith was talking about here, I want a player that has the ability to gain strokes with their short iron play. And Cameron Smith, while he's erratic off the tee and he's going to give you a lot of volatility with his game, you look at what he's provided at Open Championships in the past, the best version of him is where he can scramble, number 1 expected scrambler in my model, where he can gain around the green with his putter, number 1 expected short game player in my model, and when he can gain with some of his short iron proximity where there are certain durations from within my sheet. These are not necessarily groundbreaking totals from what you're expecting, but when he's 15th in my model in expectation from 125 to 150, when he's inside of the top 50 for me from within 100 yards, this is just a much different skill set here than we have gotten at these last couple tournaments. And I've made this argument, made it on the Rotoballer article that I wrote today. I'm probably going to make this argument numerous times throughout the week on podcasts that I do. The live golfers, for me, for this particular contest, are some of the best values and some of the worst values that you can find on this board. You have an overcorrection with some of these names. We can get into who those options are later. You also have this correction of a player like Cameron Smith, where I think this is a much better course fit for him. I talked about him being outside of the top 40 of my model at the US Open. Now, all of a sudden, this is the out of sight, out of mind game. Hasn't necessarily clicked for the first two starts for him this year in the capacity that everybody would have wanted, even though he's still making cuts and playing fine for the most part with it. I think this is a perfect bounce back and buy in spot for Cameron Smith here, whether we're talking about, I've seen this drift in the outright market at particular books into the 60s. I grabbed this at 50 at a location that was very simple for everybody to get to, but I thought 50 to 1 was a really interesting number.
I will be pouncing on 60s. It's just what he does. He just somehow gets his done in these majors. And I love this fact that he can start the first few holes on holes that really suit his game. Easier holes kind of get that momentum going. And then maybe it just spurs up some confidence in him. So
can I just touch on that really? I know we're trying to keep this show less than an hour or around an hour. And here I'm going to give a 25-minute answer on Cameron Smith. But one thing I want to say to what you just mentioned, Byron, the number one projected player in my model in par 4 scoring between 350 to 400 yards. You want to talk about 3 holes where he can start off quickly? There you go.
There we go. That's it, dude. So he's got some opportunities. We'll see what he can get up to. I'm very excited for him. Hopefully he can keep it rolling for us. Will Zalatoris is going to be my 10th ranked golfer. I know it's a bit of a shot in the dark there, but as I said, I've been using strokes gain from majors. I had to rank down his strokes gain total by a full shot to kind of get him to 10 because he was popping as like 3rd or 4th for me. He's a major contender, and I feel like out of all the venues, maybe this is the one that kind of doesn't penalize him for the distance that he's lost and maybe the accuracy he's picked up. It's a shot in the dark. I felt like I had to mention him, so that's why he's 10. Do I feel like he deserves to be in 10 spot after what we've seen? No. But in majors, this is the final opportunity. I'm going to take a flyer on him. His odds are ridiculous. I bet him at 220 to 1 for Will Zalatoris, who's got 3 second-place finishes in majors. Maybe he shows up this week. Maybe he doesn't. 220 to 1 for me is a very affordable price tag to kind of let fly. So
I feel like Keith almost fell out of his seat when you said that.
Keith, what's your take on Willie Z?
I'm speechless on that one.
Go find Willie Z at the beginning of Keith's article, which is ranked from the worst to the best, and you'll find him right over there for yourself.
Well, he's not. Hey, I didn't put him out there in like the 125 range. He's 70th. Okay. I gave him because of prior years. I gave him some respect, but let's face it, we're not sure if he's healthy. It's going to be cold and damp. Is that a great situation for a fused back? And I mean, he didn't look solid last week, and the weather was as good as it could have been at the Renaissance Club. So 220 to 1 is probably about right as far as his odds go.
Yeah, that's why I put him there to mention that, basically. That's my little bookmark for Willie Z, just to get the show off to a fiery little start. But till we get to the next guy, what is Victor Hovland doing in the number 9 hole for you, Mr. Stewart?
At times when I think about it now, it has a lot to do with you putting in Will Zalatoris there at number 10. It's somewhat, it feels like a shot in the dark after what I saw at the Scottish Open, but the guy's open record is really solid. And when we start to kind of handicap the things that you need to do really well to get around this golf course, I feel like Victor can still do those things. And I think that he could stay away from the lack of short game that he has, especially when it comes to the short grass. He could do a lot more lag putting, and similar to Cam Smith, I feel like, Victor could hit those long irons and those wedges in those first couple holes, but he also has the acumen with his long game in order to survive the last 6 holes. So I'm not completely thrown off by the performance last week. I'm also not thrown off by a 78 in the US Open or an 81 at the Masters. I mean, the second rounds that he had in both of those major championships were, below par. So I don't know. The third place at Valhalla is definitely a high ceiling, but I don't think the floor is as low as many people think it is. And as his number continues to creep, and it's probably going to get up into the mid 30s because a lot of us are saying not nice things about his short game, and he doesn't seem like he has a solution to that at the time being. So I like him at 9. I would have loved to have put him a little bit lower had he been playing better, because I feel like he's the type of guy that closes golf tournaments that's in that age group around the high 20s, much like Mr. Scheffler. But 9 is where he is.
Okay, we can handle that. I'm in agreement with you. So we are going to the well with Victor Hovland at number 9. Spencer has Bryson DeChambeau ranked number 9, but we're not going to let Spencer speak about that because somebody else has him ranked higher. So Victor Hovland, DK has him ranked 8th on the DFS side of things there. And then Keith, let's go back to you again. Hideki Matsuyama, number 8 in your rankings for Golf Digest. By the way, people, link in the description below for Golf Digest. Every single golfer ranked by Mr. Keith Stewart over there for you. Please go and enjoy that after the show for some nice, beautiful bedtime reading, and your happy dreams will be coming your way.
It's a passion project. It's roughly 6,700 words. So
Yes.
every major, we have some fun with that one. I'll keep it short and sweet on Hideki. The fact that he missed the cut last week makes me even higher on him. When Hideki expectations are low, he definitely exceeds his ceiling. And when everybody is on Hideki like they were at the Masters, he's a bit mediocre. He definitely has the game with which to suit here. And when you start to slow down the greens and you put less pressure on the putter, that's the type of place where Hideki can definitely shine. So I feel pretty good about Hideki at 8, and I like his chances this week to make a serious push come Sunday.
Yeah. Hideki has been incredible in majors, man. He has missed, I think, one cut in the last half a decade. It's quite sensational. Spencer, John Rahm for you. Also going to give that one a skip. We are cruising through to number 7. We got Colin Morikawa ranked number 7 on DraftKings. We got Keith with Tommy Fleetwood ranked number 7. Somebody has him ranked higher than number 7, which is exciting. Then Spencer, you got Tyrrell Hatton ranked number 7 as well. And someone else has him ranked higher. So I'll talk about some John Rahm over here. You had Spence for number 8. I've got him number 7. I got a hole in my foot, dear Elijah, and now the bucket has no longer got a hole, and maybe the bucket he kicketh over for John Rahm and kicked that dirty ass game that he's been bringing to the party in majors into the grave and show us who he was when he went to live. So I'm just kind of banking on his major upside. He has absolutely something to prove. He's been playing disgusting golf for the last little while, hasn't won on live yet, has been rather solid over there, but that doesn't really kind of mean much when there's only 50 guys playing or so in the field. But don't have too much to say about him. I just like his major pedigree. We're going to cruise through the sixes over here with Ludwig Åberg for DK, Ludwig Åberg for Keith, Ludwig Åberg for Spencer, and Bryson DeChambeau for me in number 6. Then number 5, we got John Rahm, which is a little bit more ahead. You know, DK's got some serious numbers on Johnny Rahm. Yeah. So Keith, hit us with your guy for Colin Morikawa, ranked 5th in your Golf Digest top power rankings.
When I go through this article and you start to get down into the top 20 and you really start to look at these names, you say, geez, oh man, it is hard. It is hard to be that good to be in the top 20, let alone get in the top 5. What has Colin Morikawa done wrong except not win a major over the last 3 months, right? Since the Masters, we're talking about 3rd, 9th, 23rd, 16th, 4th, 4th, 2nd, 14, 13, 4. I mean, what more can this guy do? I mean, he has been absolutely impeccable. And, you know, and the things that we always used to kind of point to that were like some holes in his game, whether it be the short game or it was the putter, those are some of the things he's doing the best. And I sat there and I go, golly, Colin has got to be better than 5th. But then I look at the 4 guys that are ahead of him and I go, maybe he's not, because these other guys are just that good. But I think Colin Morikawa is very, very live this week. We would all love his odds to be just a little higher. They're not going to be, because that's how good of a chance he has of winning. People might point towards the last 2 years of missed cuts since he won the Claret Jug, but I look at that as part of that transition period, especially last year where he wasn't playing his best golf. He is playing his best golf right now, and there's no doubt that this guy's a big game hunter. I know last week it looked like he was building towards something. I spent a lot of time in my career at a place called Isleworth Country Club, and I used to watch Tiger prepare for majors because he lived there. And there was no doubt in my mind that, yes, he wanted to win every week, but weeks leading up to majors, he was working on things to specifically peak in order to try to win those big four events. And I think that the guys like a Colin Morikawa that have already won multiple majors understand that in their career. And I think that Colin was working toward things last week. He's trying to peak, not at the Scottish Open, but he's trying to peak at the British Open. And I think he's ready to do that this week.
Keith, he's got the most top fives out of everyone since 2021 in majors. So quite impressive stuff from him there. Spence, let's hear your voice for a little bit. We've been cruising through his names. I'm quite proud of what we're getting up to, but I want to hear what you got to say about anything that's been said in the last little while.
Well, I want to touch on what Sia just said. Not that we need to go through it, but I'm trying to listen to what Keith was saying because there's a lot of great information that he added, but I'm sitting over here chuckling to myself over that comment. But one of the things I do, and I talk about it quite frequently, is I always look for a course-specific answer. So how does a player fit the specific venue that's being played? We can all run numbers. We can all look at data. We can all try to throw the math together of why somebody makes sense. But the answer that ends up making the most sense is, how do you weight the numbers to fit a specific course? How do we weight this to fit Royal Troon? Weighted strokes gained total for me is always a very important statistic because it takes the nuanced factors of what I'm looking for off the tee approach. The around the green and putting always have a lot of similarities. Like for putting this week, I can throw in slow surfaces. I can throw in smaller green complexes. There are a lot of ways that I can make it more nuanced in that sense, but I'm always trying to build it for a venue. And the number one player in my model for expected weighted strokes gained total was Colin Morikawa. He opened at 18-1 at some books. You can still get 16 or 17. I kind of made the argument at the US Open where if you compared him directly with Xander Schauffele, I thought Xander was the better bet between the two, just when you look at what they had gotten up to recently. But how do we overlook everything that Keith just said with the results Morikawa was throwing together? The real detriment to his game was the short game in the putting. He has gained six consecutive times around the green, 5 consecutive times putting. Last week off the tee at the Scottish Open was the first time that he didn't gain heavily with the driver. Yeah. I didn't think that was necessarily a great course fit for him. You throw him now here for a venue that's accuracy dependent, and he's one of the top accuracy players in the world. I really cannot think of an Open Championship that is more well-rounded and suited for a player than what we're going to get here for Colin. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to win, and he's not number one in my model, but I will tell you this. I bet him at 18-1, and there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic with the form that he's bringing in here.
Ooh, so you pounced on Colin at 18, Spencer.
Yeah, that's where I went at the top of the board for me. Like that was the decision was Xander or Colin of where I wanted to go. And I wouldn't talk anybody out of either one of those two routes. I just think Colin is bringing all the right skill sets where Xander's driver has been a little bit shakier than Colin's for a handful of starts now.
Yeah. Xander's been a little iffy since he's kind of won that PGA championship, which is why I've got him ranked 5th over there, but someone else has him ranked higher. He's ranked 4th in the DraftKings slate. Keith has got Bryson DeChambeau ranked number 4. Hit us with the Bobo.
I think that Spencer keeps bringing up a really, really important point this week. And putting the rankings aside is that you really have to understand what makes Troon special as a roto course. All right. Sitting on the seaside and the West Coast, it gets beat by weather like you wouldn't believe. Right. And those first 6 holes and the depth of the bunkers and all of these factors play into, like, if you're looking at someone because their strokes gained was great at St. Andrews back there in 2022, then you really don't understand what it takes in order to kind of play the different styles of golf courses and the ground game that it takes. The fairways were 200-yard wide over there at St. Andrews, and this is going to be like hitting it through, like threading a needle. right? And in so many ways, these guys, because of their power and their consistency with their ball striking, won't necessarily have to hit driver everywhere. Where they do, everyone will have to hit it, and everyone will have their misses, and everyone will have their makes. But when you start to compare two people like I have right here at 5 and 4, right? St. Andrews in every way is the one place where you'd say, man, Bryson is the guy, right? And Troon is the place where you'd say, wow, Colin is the guy, or that type of archetype player is the person that I'm looking for, right? Now, overall, Bryson has proven himself this year to kind of buck the trend and say, hey, you know what? I could be a more well-rounded player, and that's why I have him at 4 versus Colin at 5, and he's basically the U.S. Open champion, and he's gone 6-2-1 in his 3 majors. But at the end of the day, right, the fit for Troon is the reason why Bryson is 4 and he's not higher for me. And as long as you understand what the golf course calls for, then you're going to do much better in betting or DFS than your friends or in your neighborhood pool or whatever you're doing, your weekend wagers. You really have to understand what is needed here. The bunkers are super, super severe. They are deep. They needed to be avoided off the tee. You can't just go with reckless abandon off the tee on these first couple of holes and say, you know what, they're under 400 yards. I'm Bryson, and I'm just going to blast driver everywhere. You're going to watch him have a game plan for this. And does it suit Colin better than him? Well, it depends who hits the ball better. But at the end of the day, I really do like the fact that Spencer keeps bringing up the differences between these rota golf courses and why you can't just go purely with only just people's performances there, but you also have to look at how everything matches up as well. I do feel like Bryson has evolved in a lot of ways as a player, and I think that that's very interesting. He's an incredible putter and an incredible lag putter, and I think that will make up for some of his ills that he might have happen off the tee. This is not going to be like wiregrass roulette like we saw at Pinehurst. Yes. If Bryson starts blaming his driver like he did at St. George's, then all bets are off. But at the end of the day, if Bryson is able to come up with a game plan that succeeds and puts the wedge in his hand and the putter in his hand, then he's certainly live as well.
Keith, that was a great summation of what I think we can expect from Bryson. I mean, he's arguably one of the better course fits and arguably one of the worst course fits for this venue, depending on what kind of edition of Bryson shows up. So fun times to be had by him. Spencer's got Rory ranked number 4. Someone else has him ranked higher. We'll let somebody else speak about him. DK has him ranked 3rd for Rory. Keith has Xander number 3, so he's not going to be speaking about Xander. Scotty Scheffler number 3 for Spence. That might be giving some stuff away to a touch here, but let's chat about Ludwig Aubert, who I've got ranked 3rd. And when it comes to total driving, this dude is a phenom. I mean, distance and accuracy. He's got them both, unless he's in the lead on Sunday at the Scottish Open. Then he turns into a puddle of poo. Whatever that was not very good. Maybe it was good for him to feel that going into the week. He's always kind of typically been chasing these guys, the big boys, at least in the big tournaments, whereas the RSM, he kind of did his thing against a bunch of scrubs. But Ludwig has shown his thing at majors. I think these venues that require not short, narrow fairways with thick rough, I prefer danger, like the RSM, like kind of Harbour Town kind of venues where you have to thread the needle, so to speak, Keith, like you mentioned. Ludwig in that department is amazing. With these bigger greens, I also hope that he's going to be able to hit a lot more green regulations than having to rely on his chipping. That let him down in a big way, and it let him down at the US Open, and it let him down at the Scottish. His short game around the greens is a bit of a concern. It's mediocre, while the rest of his game is world-class. So when it gets pressurized, he kind of loses it a bit in that department. He kind of chipped himself out the US Open, chipped himself out of the Scottish. So we'll see what he can get up to. But I'm very bullish on him again going into the week. I think a lot of people will be too. DraftKings has Bryson ranked 2nd on the DK slate. And then, Keith, you've got Rory ranked your 2nd golfer.
I love Rory this week. I really do. I'm writing an article. You have to understand a lot of what goes into writing an article that's labeled the power rankings for everyone in the world to look at on golf's largest digital platform, right? It's not who you're betting. It's who you think is the best player for the situation for this tournament, right? And I am not a big Rory backer. Most people that know me know that I very, very rarely bet Rory because he tends to. There was a tweet right before the Masters that said, if you don't understand betting, what you do is you bet $100 on Rory to win the Masters and you lose $100, and I was like, that was pretty funny, like, I mean, that's the way we all feel about what he's been doing lately over the last decade in majors. But I think that the somber silence that we all felt after Pinehurst really kind of punctuates where Rory was, and between the divorce, the not divorce, and all of the rumors swirling around him and everything else, like a grip on your clubs, like a grip on your world. And I feel like the Rory reset of the last month has done a lot for him, and Troon's a good fit for him because for all the reasons we love Bryson, Rory can do that off the tee. And for all the scoring technique that he has growing up over there in Northern Ireland, he's a good fit for that seaside links. I mean, he grew up right there at Portrush, which is also another place that's battered by the ocean. And, golly, I mean, I think I could go on like a senseless soliloquy about Rory for an hour. But at the end of the day, here's a guy that has more top tens in majors since he's won a major. He consistently contends. Everybody in the world is going to be pulling for him up there. He is going to feel the emotion of the crowd. He did exactly what we needed him to do at Scotland, which was not win, but show us that he is completely reset and ready to go. And everybody misses a couple putts. Everybody misses a couple of shots, but this place sets up very well for him. 2016, he finished fifth and what was basically two tournaments. There was two guys that played. And then in the second tournament, he was right there behind JB Holmes in third. And I really don't know what else to say. I feel strongly that Rory is going to get his major victory this week. And that's the reason I have him there, number 2. And that I also feel like, it's not even a bad bet at 8-1. There, I've said it.
Have you bet him, Keith, at 8-1?
I have.
There we go. I mean, he's due, right, Spence?
Well, here's what I want to say. I had him at the U.S. Open, and that was a very difficult loss. I see in the chat everybody saying that you have to hit fairways here. And yes, we're having that discussion. But inside of my model, you look at strokes gained off the tee when you have hard fairways or fairways that must be hit would be the better way to word that inside of my model. Rory McIlroy is number 1. Like, not every single course, just because you're inaccurate. Like, we've had this discussion. Bryson can go to some venues, Rory can go to some venues, and you can bomb away all you want. Like, Rory's going to have a game plan here. I know that we can talk about his caddy and him are not always on the same page. There are bad decisions, bad course managements that come into play with it. Historically, on venues that are similar to this, Rory has consistently been the best driver in the world. So if you were to tell me that let's remove Scottie Scheffler from the mix, and I'm not even so overly confident with removing him here, and you were to tell me you have to pick one player in this tournament and you either win your money or lose your money based off of you have to come in the top 10, I would say Rory is the most likely person to come in the top 10 of anybody in this event that's not named Scottie. And you could really push me in the direction that even maybe Scottie included on that with how I have Scottie ranked in my model. And that's a different discussion to be had here. But I agree with Keith. I don't think this 8-1 is as outlandish as people believe it to be. I didn't get there myself because I took a much different approach, but I've said this a million times. I said it with Keith the first time we did a show. I've done it every single major. Like, Rory more often than not makes my major championship cards, and books are really good lately at skewing odds against the people that are the ones that you actually should be betting. And Rory is skewed much more than most players. And that's a very dangerous game, because if the books are saying that and they obviously don't want you to have exposure to him, there's some concern that Rory could come out and win. I'm not going to make that prediction as far as what Keith said, but I really do like him here for DFS purposes. He's a very interesting play to put into builds.
That's the best part of it. Go ahead, Keith. Yeah.
I mean, to compound that, like, at the end of the day, that top 10 question is really very thoughtful in many ways, because a lot of people are going to chime in. They're going to say, oh, strokes gained, over on links courses and everything. I want fairway Jesus and blah, blah, blah. Like, well, what did Tommy do last week? Right? After 2 top 10s at the Scottish, he ends up in the 30s. right? Like, who is really guaranteed to top 10 here? Well, of course, Scotty is. But Spencer said if we remove Scotty from the equation, who else is really guaranteed to top 10 here? Because don't tell me just because he's 6 for 6 in Open Championships that it's Xander, because he doesn't top 10 over here. Right now, he's extremely consistent and he makes cuts. But I mean, Bryson's got one top 10, and that's out where, at St. Andrews, we already talked about that, right? Rory is the guy that is going to be there on Sunday. And if you can't handle it, then don't bet him, right? But if you can, then he is going to take you on a trip. And it's not going to be like a Spieth trip, right? It's not going to be that high and low. It's going to be pretty high the whole time. And then we'll see where we get at the end, right? At the end of the day, everyone wants to point to his putting at Pinehurst, but I was there. That wasn't the issue. The issue was his iron game on Sunday. Yes, everyone will remember the putt on 16 and 18, but that was not the issue. He made putts all day long, right? And as things evened out, yes, you can't make every putt in the world. And there was a lot of pressure there at the end. Come on. It's a major championship. It was Pinehurst, but it was his iron game that let him down. So he looked really good at the Scottish. He's come back. He's reset. The last time, I mean, do you remember in 2011? That's the only guy that's ever been to Butler Cabin and never won a green jacket. I mean, he hooked that drive. If you've ever been to Augusta, he hooked that drive so far left off of 10. And he completely, that is the definition of ejecting yourself from a tournament. And he had the lead and he shot 80. Do you remember that look on his face when he teed off of 13 and hit the ball in the creek? And he leaned on his driver and he looked like he was like Max Homa at the Travelers, like he was ready to cry. I mean, like that. And what did he do in the next major? He won the U.S. Open by 8 at Congressional. A similar comparison, when Rory lost the Open Championship, which was his to win at St. Andrews, and your boy won, Byron, right, in 2022. And I'm not comparing the FedEx Cup to the Masters or any of this other stuff, but I'm just saying he came back and he dominated and won the FedEx Cup that year, right? Rory has been really resistant. And a lot of this nonsense that keeps happening to him. You remember at the Players, right? He finished top 20, but he made 10 birdies in the first round. And he was leading that tournament. Then all the talk and discussion with Johnson Wagner throwing balls off the bankment and everything. And next thing you know, I was at that tournament. People were yelling to Rory, like, where are you going to drop it now, huh? The guy's an emotional guy, right? Like, that got under his skin. And then he didn't play very well the rest of the tournament. I think he needed like a cleanse, right? And I think he got that the last couple of weeks. And I think that you could point to any statistic that'll say that he'll win here. And you could point to any statistic that'll say that he'll lose here. But I feel very strongly this is a good course fit for him because it has a lot of the same characteristics of what he grew up on over at Royal Portrush. And when he comes over here, he's going to feel comfortable. And I think he has a really, really good chance to get the job done here. And I would never bet Rory 8-1 in a regular event, signature event, or anything else. But in a major, with his record, the way it's been, especially over the last 5 years, it's really, really strong. I think there's a good chance.
I mean, he hit rock bottom at the US Open. It's only up from there, Keith. Like that's the thing. It's like he's reset, like he's recalibrated, he's ready to go. I've got space for Rory. I've only bet 2 guys with very high odds because I'm waiting for the draw to come out, but I don't know. I'm very tempted. I bet him at Royal Liverpool last year. So we'll see what cooks.
Speaking
Spencer.
of the draw, real quick,
Oh, yeah.
do you guys, do you get, as the way the forecast looks right now, do either of you guys have a wave that you're favoring, or do you feel like it's just going to rain the whole thing?
I think as of the start, I was going PM AM, Spence.
I mean, the one thing I will say is, and this is kind of the one piece of advice I would give to everybody, if we're talking specifically DFS here for a second, wait as long as you can to see the weather forecast. Like it's a little bit more complicated with bets because numbers are going to move based off of decisions and what actually is happening. But for DFS purposes, wait as long as you can. Things are going to shift. Anytime you get a European course that is going to be heavily exposed, anything can truly happen in those spots.
And speaking of heavily exposed, Spencer, Tommy Fleetwood, your number 2 guy.
Yeah, this is as high as Fleetwood's ever been in my model of me building a sheet. And I was very surprised. And I think it's like, I want to use Fleetwood and Hatton. I'll have a discussion for both of them because I think you're getting a very similar viewpoint with each one of these 2 names. I've continued to make an argument for a lot of players like this. I had this discussion for Matthew Fitzpatrick last week, which didn't necessarily come to fruition, but there are certain players, Fleetwood and Hatton being the 2 this week, that have a higher projected win equity for me when you throw them onto these European link style courses than what we typically get in America. And you don't have to look any further. I know we look at the odds board and numbers are moving. You could have gotten a little bit better or worse on some of these prices, depending on when you bet it and where you bet it at. But for the most part right now, Hatton and Fleetwood are both 25-1. I got Hatton at 28. There was a 26-1 at Circa on Fleetwood. There's 25s that were readily available in the space when it opened. Those are not necessarily those prototypical numbers that you see and you say, oh, Fleetwood 25-1, player that hasn't won on the PGA Tour, who's going to go win a major. But I think the most pronounced thing to that answer for me when we really start diving into the information here is that it's the same sentiment that I was just talking about of books skewing odds. We can talk about how they're skewing the odds for Rory because there's some fear that Rory gets across the finish line. I think the same fear is happening here with Fleetwood and Hatton. And specifically with Hatton, this number is probably going to continue to move throughout the week. He seems to be a sharp, better move, and even some of the public money's coming in on him. Fleetwood is not quite as sharp. My model likes him a little bit more than it likes Hatton, but fifth in my model for Fleetwood and weighted strokes gained total here. This is the ideal venue. Open championships are the ideal venue. If Fleetwood's going to get across the finish line, I don't even know if at this point there's a difference between a regular tournament and a major. I think he's as likely to win here as he would be any week, and maybe more so this week just because of the conditions we're talking about of this being in Europe at a link style course that suits his game a little bit more than an American venue might.
Spencer, Tommy Fleetwood has 7 DP World Tour wins. And, this is the reason why Tommy's not in my top. He's not like in my top 5 or with all the strokes gained and push that is behind Tommy and everything, and the way that he's played at the Scottish and all these other factors. But of his 7 DP World Tour wins, only one's been in Scotland. The rest of them have been in Dubai. They've been in South Africa. I mean, they've been all over the place, right? But I get that he plays very well on link style golf courses, but he doesn't necessarily win there. He's won on more American style golf courses, to be quite honest, right? Does that give you any pause?
I mean, to be honest with you, Keith, I do think that this is more Americanized of a course. And I've talked about the 200 yards added and let's see what happens. But I think this lands somewhere in the middle of an American style links course and a European style links course. Any of the scrambling numbers that I have for Fleetwood here are extremely robust. Like 6 for me in weighted scoring. That takes a lot of that scrambling I'm talking about. Weighted scrambling, third in my model. You want to look at him out of the sand inside the top 30. You want to look at him at comp courses, which is taking a lot of these Scottish style venues that have these slow greens and any of those nuance factors inside of the top 10 for me there. I think where your argument, or it's not even that's an argument that you're making, but where your point becomes sound is none of these answers that I've read off are putting him inside of the first or second spot. So, there's obviously some fear here that this is one of those typical Tommy Fleetwood performances where he comes in second or third place and doesn't get across the finish line. But, when I'm building numbers and I'm trying to find an edge, my numbers are trying to find who's the most likely person to get to a specific total. And we're not necessarily then taking, I've deemed this to be choke equity in the past. Like we're not taking choke equity and throwing it into a model and going, well, this is a guy who can't get himself across the finish line. Like my model can't differentiate between a player that either is getting across all the time and not. It's just spitting out the raw data of what they think the player is going to do. And for Tommy to take the combination of all the statistics I look for, I weighed 6 categories, extremely in depth of what went into them. For him to grade number 2 in my model when this is an outlier sort of a result, last week when I looked, and this is kind of your answer of, throw him in Scotland and maybe he doesn't necessarily have that upside that you're talking about. For me, for an upside answer for the Genesis Scottish Open, he was 25th in my model. A lot of the overall safety numbers liked him better than that. Falls apart on Sunday. He comes in 30th. This is a portion of my model now this week. He's second across the board, second overall, second for upside, second for safety. Just a much different profile for me of how he fit for this course versus last week. So, you gave this answer about Hideki, and I think Hideki's a really intriguing outright ticket DFS play for all the reasons that you talked about. Fleetwood struggling on Sunday is the best thing in my mind to happen to him here entering this tournament.
100%, and extremely well said. And I completely agree with you that of most of the courses in the Rota, this one, as exemplified by the 8th hole, the postage stamp, is probably the most target oriented, or the most domestic in our world over here, in the States, style and design and in strategy for sure. So yeah, I love it.
I will just say with Fleetwood, if this score gets past -15, he doesn't stand a chance. If it remains in the low teens, I love him. And that's, kind of what I'm waiting for the weather to show us, maybe. But we don't really know where the heck we're going with that stuff anyway. All right. So I've got Rory McIlroy highlighted yellow here, but we're going to go with Scottie Scheffler, number 1 DraftKings ranking. Keith, hit us with your Scottie Scheffler take for an Open Championship, which is best finish in the last 3 attempts has been in 8th place, with the other 2 being outside the top 20.
Scottie Scheffler is the best golfer in the world. If we need great ball striking, if we need to be an extremely cerebral golfer getting around this golf course, if we need luck, he has shown that, he's the only guy I know that can get booked and put into a mugshot back at the golf course to meet his tee time. I've been on a lot of buddies trips. A lot of guys miss their tee time if they end up going to jail, So at the end of the day, I think there's enough things we could say about Scottie Scheffler. My biggest concern with Scottie, and the reason that I wouldn't bet him, and let's just say the number was a fair number. Let's say it's a number that you wanted. I have concerns about Scottie Scheffler versus the Rory, or if you want to say it's Bryson or Xander or Colin, whoever that may be, is that I do believe at times this is going to turn into a glorified putting contest, much like Pinehurst did. And a lot of people asked me, they said, well, why'd you fade Scottie at Pinehurst? And I said, well, once I saw how crispy the place was, I said, everyone's going to hit to the same spot on the green, and this is going to become like a big lag putting contest, which isn't necessarily his strength. His superpower was hitting long irons into greens and then hitting them in places that no one else could hit them. Well, everyone had to play to the same spot and everyone had to putt from the same spot. Then basically it became like mini golf, and that did not suit him. And it ended up with, 41st place. So I have concerns if it turns out to be that again. If Scottie's allowed to use his superpower, then the fuel from the 41st place means that he'll probably win like Henrik did. And, the guy in third will be 15 strokes behind.
When Scottie does his thing, he does his thing. And what I'm most excited about, Keith, is the fact that he got his ass kicked at the Memorial right before the US Open. And so did the whole field. He won that tournament, but he was still kind of exhausted. He was still exhausted from the jail stint. He's taken off 3 weeks. He didn't even play the Scottish. I think Scottie knows Scotland like no one else. And I think we're going to have another Scott-ish type situation going on this week, potentially. Maybe not. Hopefully he finishes second because no one's betting him. Spencer, hit us with Xander Schauffele for your number 1 ranked golfer over Hirsel.
I'm going to spend the majority of this time talking about Scottie. And the only reason why I'm going to do that is because I've kind of talked about Xander. Like, to me, at the top of the board, this decision is either Xander or Morikawa. My model likes him. I come on this show every single week and talk about he is the second projected golfer in my model and expected strokes gain total over a 2-year running duration. I think his win equity is better than the public believes it to be. And it's a very similar answer that I would give here when you talk about him 15-1 in the space. There was a real decision that was made between him and Morikawa where I didn't take that lightly, and I went the Morikawa route just because of some of the stuff we've seen. The one thing I wanted to say about Scottie that I wanted to double down on, like, if you look at the Scottie answer, and Keith and I are not doing it this week, but if you go back and you reverse this to the US Open show, Keith and I gave 2 of the most impassioned speeches that you were going to hear on a podcast of every single reason why we were not backing Scottie Scheffler at a 3-1 number and why it made no sense. A lot of that had to do with the course, the volatility that was going to come into play. Royal Troon is a better property because he's going to be able to accentuate certain parts of his game a little bit, where I think Keith is correct with this and kind of where pushed me off of this. You get these small greens. Everybody is going to be missing or hitting into the same similar areas here. And if you want to talk about what this putter is projected to do, because this was my problem with him at the US Open, massive negative trajectory marks. in expected putting on that course. He has those same massive negative trajectory marks for me this week. Like, if you look at players sub 100 to 1, Spieth, Thomas, Homa, McIntyre, Henley, Oberg, him. That was the group that had the biggest difference in expectation in a bad way on these greens with their putter versus what you would expect for them to have at a different venue. And the problem is with Scotty here, it's not necessarily a death sentence for him to win. However, if you add in the subpar scrambling ability from out of the sand, that is not a number in my model in some of these. Like, he's outside of the top 50. And I'm not saying that's a return that is like so troublesome, but when we're talking about a 5-1 golfer, there's a different discussion, as Keith said, to be had. Put him at 8-1, 9-1, 10-1. I can overlook some of these issues that he has in his game. Rory has issues with his game, but he's 8-1. Like, there's a different outlook here. So it all comes down to value and where you're trying to get the price. If it's always number shopping at 5-1, I'm out because of that reason. He's never drifting up past that number, but like in the crazy world where he's 9-1, I wouldn't be having the same answer that I'm giving here. It's just things change.
Yeah, it's all they've placed the bets in spots that is unsustainable. That's just the thing. I think when I was looking for our little Photoshop for the thumbnail, I was listening to some of the stuff we were saying, and it's just like we were saying, the people that want to show up for the US Open and bet him one time, go ahead and bet that. But like, if you're trying to do this every week, you can't be betting Scotty at the numbers he's at, because it's just, at some point he's going to lose 8 times in a row, and then you're going to be completely out of luck and out of money and out of bankroll. So tough scenes there. But we're going to dive into our tiers now. We've done a decent job of scooting through here, folks. I'm quite proud of you. I'm proud of the chat as well. We've done 51 minutes for the top 10 rankings, which for us is a solid accomplishment. Maybe we've got half an hour to chat some stuff. So hit the like button. Please, folks, don't forget to subscribe while you're at it. Hit us in the comments below. Tell us who you think your gourmet play is for the week. Who's the highest price golfer that you're willing to pay up for because you like him that much? All right, gentlemen, let's get into this. Gourmet or cray-cray in the top 10,000 and above range. You got to hit me with your favorite and your least favorite. Mr. Stewart, you go first.
In the 10K and above, I would have to say my gourmet will be Rory, and for all the reasons cited earlier, and my cray-cray would be Jon Rahm. I'm not quite sure. A mediocre Masters, a miscut at the PGA, and then a withdrawal at the US Open, and a third in Nashville, and whatever he was, 9th at Valderrama in Spain, and Spain won the Euro Cup. I mean, you'd think he'd have been a little more fired up, although he didn't know that at the time. I'm not quite sure. 10-4 on Jon Rahm. And again, look at his open record. Jon Rahm's game much more fits an American style type, US Open style golf course. And I'm not quite sure it's super suited to Troon. So there you go. There's my gourmet and whatever the other thing is. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and take your cray-cray and turn it into my gourmet, because I think for a $10,400 Jon Rahm, people will not be going to him. There's not a lot to like about, like you mentioned there, Keith. I think all the reasons you don't like him are the reasons I do, because no one's going to be playing him, essentially. That's my anticipation. We'll see what the ownership shakes out as. Maybe the simpletons out there playing a major will click Jon Rahm because, maybe all the happy Spaniards after the Euro win. But I like Johnny. He grades out nicely. If he can just find that freaking baseline in the majors again, we're cooking. That. But the driver, I've seen him hit driver left far too often. When he was in his prime, the ball was never going left on him. So, but we'll wait and see. If he's above 10% ownership, I won't be going to him. So it's an ownership dependent gourmet play. And then for me, cray-cray, I think Bryson at 11.5. I'm not entirely sure this is the best course for him. Like, I think the price for Bryson 11.5 is his upside. It's definitely not his floor price. So he could easily be a 9K golfer, maybe 9.5K, based off what he's shown us at Open Championships in the past. So Spence, in the 10s, gourmet, cray-cray.
It's obviously ownership dependent. We're giving this answer early. I mean, it's a Monday. We have 48 hours and plus until this thing is going to lock. I made an argument, and I'm not saying that this is like, if you're building 150 lineups, like Rory and Xander are going to make my builds. I don't know how overweight or where I'm going to be with them, but like those are the two that are going to, I guess, be the gourmet options. There's a lot of $9,000 golfers I really like. I talked about, and we'll get into this section. We don't need to spend the whole time, but like Morikawa, Hatton, Fleetwood, those are names I'm going to be overly exposed to. So for the top end, it's Rory and Xander that I'm going to at least try to fit into builds. I guess for Cray here, I probably lean towards DeChambeau, not knowing where his ownership's going to land, just because I think what we've gotten from him this season in the first three majors, people are going to want to play him. And I would agree with you, Byron, where I don't think this is necessarily the most ideal course fit for him. The one caveat that I at least want to throw out there that's noteworthy is, to me, Bryson is a lot safer than maybe what the public perception ends up being here if for some reason people don't want to use him. So if this ends up in a spot where Bryson, because he's so highly priced here at 11,500 as the second name, and everybody finds themselves wanting to go to Rory or Scotty or whoever the person is, I mean, any of those names, like if Bryson ends up becoming a pivot option, I do think there are worse ways than you can go than that. Like, I'm going to use him as my cray without knowing where the ownership lands, but I also don't think that this is terrible if he's sub 10%.
I don't think he will be. I think he's just so likable. People will just want to click his name, and he's $1,300 cheaper than Scotty, where I think everyone's clamoring to say that Bryson's better than Scotty anyway. So
can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Right. And this will end up being more like a PSA for the people that aren't willing to ask it in the comments. Or, I mean, you guys are two of the most unbelievable experts in playing DFS that are out there online. There's no doubt about it, right? When it comes to leverage and you're looking at this, do you ever look at it like it's a sliding scale? Whereas, I mean, if you go that leverage dependent up there, like you were saying, Byron, with John Rahm, like if I can get him under 10, then I'm going to take him because that's a great leverage play. But what if he plays like shit? Like, I mean, at some point, does leverage in that range, I'm talking about in this range, and what I mean by a sliding scale is that obviously when you get down into the 7s, 8s, in that the meat of it all there, leverage plays a huge part of it, right? But you have many more options. Up here at the top, I hear people talk about leverage all the time, and I'm going, well, there's such a premium for winning, right? If you take John Rahm and we really don't think he can win versus a guy like Scotty Scheffler, right? Or if it's Rory or if it's Xander, to go with the guys that Spencer's talking about, do you feel like you look at leverage less in the value range, or do you look at the same way, whether it's 10K, 9K, 8K? I mean, how would you explain that to somebody who is listening to this in a manner with where they're like, geez, but I thought I need to pick the winner at the top. How can I go away from a guy? How can I take the worst guy in 10K plus and spend that much money and then handicap the rest of my lineup with a guy I'm really not certain that can do much other than the fact that he can get me 8%?
Cool. I'll go ahead and give you a quick, simple answer that I think Spencer will expand on. When it comes to John Rahm, say he's 7%, Keith.
Yeah.
All I'm going to do is put him in 15%. So what? 15% of 150 lineups is 20 lineups, 25 lineups, so yep. It's not that big of an investment. He's also John Rahm. If he lands up winning this somehow, because he's very ultra talented, and when you're getting into a field that's got 100,000 odd participants, you're trying to differentiate yourself to a degree. And it's not like I'm investing the majority of my bankroll in him. I'm just kind of fractionizing, if that's even a word, him in my player.
Okay.
The answer I would give to this is, so I have a portion of my model that's built for this exact example here. So I'm looking at my overall rank. I'm comparing it to what their DK price is, and then I'm going to compare it to the ownership. Obviously, Keith, when you ask that question, one of the things that comes into play is that your leverage difference, because there's two ways to look at this. Like, it's what is your price compared to what the DK actual price is going to be, and what is your rank compared to what the ownership is in that spot. And I've always made this argument that if you look at my sheet here and we just go across the board and we've just talked about these players, like, yeah, Xander's number 1 for me. John Rahm is 8th. He's 7th for upside. Oberg is 6th. Morikawa was 5th. Like, when you actually break it down to what does that number mean in my model, and that's the one thing that like not everybody has access to with it. Like you can see what my ranking is, but there's an actual number that my model spits out for me. And you start to realize that a lot of times in this specific section, it's not as extreme of a difference as you expect it to be. So I guess for Byron's answer there that I would kind of double down on it is when I can create extreme leverage in the spot on a golfer that is, it's like the head-to-head answer. You know, you might compare John Rahm to Oberg as a random example. This is not a number that I have. And you might have Oberg at minus 120 to win that matchup. But you look at the ownership percentage and Oberg is 25% and John Rahm is 7%. Well, the market is telling you that those two are much closer in perception than what the actual ownership percentage ends up being. So I throw a lot of that into my model. I'm always trying to figure out where the sharp movement is going in each direction there. And that also adds for me. But I know that doesn't necessarily precisely answer the question, Keith, but I guess to more so bullet point in on it, like, yes, it does matter at the top because you need the win equity. But if the leverage that can get created from it surpasses that answer, I'm more inclined to take chances based off of that.
No, you both have answered my question. And, a lot of what we say, people take very literally. So when you look at that and you're not explaining what, like, let's just simply say what Byron said, which was, well, I'm only going to do that in like 15% of my lineups. Well, most people, when they hear that, the cray part or the gourmet part, they're going, well, geez, I'm doing that in all of my lineups, and their lineups might just be 10 of them. Right. So you have to understand something. Like, my background as a PGA professional, like, I taught golf and I still teach golf all the time. So like, I'm always kind of thinking about like what the average person sees and knows. And then like, how are they taking that? Cause I can tell you, I've made plenty of mistakes giving lessons where like I said something and I just assumed that people had a certain base level of knowledge, and then they didn't, and it's just one of those things. So when I have the opportunity with you guys as a resource, and I think it's also something that would help the people that watch this, right? I'm willing to ask the embarrassing question and say, hey, like, what do you really mean by that? Because at the end of the day, people will learn so much from that. And they want to make their own decisions anyway, but they will learn so much from you guys by saying that they'll learn equally as much as they will from our rankings or anything else. So I appreciate you saying that. And then the second part was just like, do you feel that leverage matters more at certain price points, or is that too much of a carte blanche question? And is it better to say that, it always depends on the situation. I get that part, but is it any less or more when you get to these extreme ends of the DFS value chart, we'll say?
I'll take this first just very quickly. Like, to me, leverage matters more in specific, like, I think the contest that we're playing is where we want to be looking more. If you're playing a single entry, you need less spots to get different. And I think that's one of the misconceptions that comes into play in general with it, is where people think you have to be more diverse than what you actually are in these spots. Like, if you take your aggregated total of ownership, I mean, unless you just go super chalk across the board with it and you take the highest owned player in every single range and you end up getting yourself duped with it, like, it's not as relevant as you actually think it is in those positions. Like, when I'm talking about leverage and trying to create leverage at the top, it usually comes from these spots. And like, I'll give you an example with John Rahm here. Like, if we're going to use him specifically, he's eighth in my model. If he ends up entering this, and I don't know where he will be, where he is the 70th ranked guy in ownership. Well, now we've created this very large deviation from how much higher my model is on him than public consensus with it. So I'm looking for those high-end moves on these top-end guys, but I mostly agree with you, Keith, on this answer, to where win equity matters so much in this range. And when you start picking solely in these spots to be different, which is, I don't think what Byron and I are necessarily saying. Like, Byron and I still like John Rahm, it seems like, much more than public consensus likes John Rahm this weekend. So this isn't us just like necessarily picking a name and saying, well, I'm going to get overweight because this feels like a fun spot to do it. It's no, we think he's a top 7-8 projected player who's maybe even a little bit better than that, where let's see where the ownership comes in. If ownership comes in with him at like 6%, I can guarantee you, based off of what Byron has said and based off of what my model has said in mine, we will be higher than public consensus on him just naturally.
Yeah.
And the Millie Maker, Keith, has got 130,000 people in it. So when you take 30% of 130,000, that's 40,000 people, for instance, that will be playing one of the top owned guys. If that guy for some reason has a clunker, that's 30% of that entire population just completely gone. Like you don't have to play against them anymore. And I think that's also, I will not be playing John Rahm in a cash game, where you're just trying to double your money and finish inside the top 50%. That's kind of the very simplistic kind of ending to that discussion there, which Darbo mentions. Maybe we can get on it and have a really nice in-depth situation. I think we did a very good job of kind of expediting the nuances of all of that as we were going into it. So
that was great. I'm sure people really appreciate that watch this. So,
I will definitely be clipping this so we can, replay it and just have it as a standalone clip, because I think it's very beneficial to people getting into it, and even people who play DFS quite often and just haven't understood this yet. It took me a long time to figure out exactly what's going on in DFS, because I'd started betting versus DFS to start off with. So it's complicated.
We should sidebar. The last thing I'll say on that, we should sidebar and do a whole separate show, because I could come up with 100 questions, because I hear these things all the time. And then I'm out there on the road and I'm in the media center or I'm around people and they're always asking me questions, and and there are experts for everything. And you guys are experts at this. And I think that it would be extremely valuable for people to dig in on all of this, because they might find that there are parts of DFS and or betting, right, that they have a lot more passion for, but they didn't know because so much of this is over their head. Or maybe they do understand more than they know, which would invigorate them or inspire them. So hit us with the 9s. Let's go. Sorry.
Let's go. You hit us with the 9s, Keith. Who's your gourmet and cray in that range?
I tell you, this is an amazing group. Gourmet, I'm going to go with Patrick Cantlay.
Ooh,
and
that's some gourmet stuff.
And my cray, I'm going to go with Brooks Koepka.
Okay. I'm assuming Brooksy's recent form issue, Patrick Cantlay's lack of major upside, is what you kind of thinking might change this week.
I think that Xander's work this year and the way he's taken control of his life, separated himself from his dad, working with Chris Como, all the things that I've witnessed this year, the leadership decisions that he has made since January or since the Ryder Cup to take control of his career and take it next level have paid off immensely. And those guys are a lot closer on tour than people give them credit for. They play every practice round together. I walk with them a lot because Patrick's coach is a very good friend. And he is very, very nice to me, Jamie. And, he tells me a lot about what's going on there, and what Xander's done has really motivated Patrick. And I think Patrick's going to have a huge second half. And as a result, and based upon that last conversation, I'm not ignorant to all of that, but I felt like you guys are the perfect opportunity to ask that question, right? And I see in this range right here, there's just so many names that you could have some fun with. And I think that Cantlay is the one that has tremendous upside that people would kind of just be missing. And sometimes I like to find the diamond in the rough.
I would call Cantlay gourmet Brussels sprouts, which are things I do not like whatsoever. Spencer, in the 9s, gourmet or cray?
I'm always much higher than public consensus is on Patrick Cantlay. It's been, I've gotten a lot of pushback for that. It works out better in some spots like the US Open where he performs. It's worked out in worse spots where he's missed the cut in some of these situations. There were 4 players for me in the 9th, and this is not taking ownership into account here, just taking the price tag. There were 4 players that my model was higher on than the price tag that we got. Morikawa, Hatton, Fleetwood, Cantlay. Cantlay's going to be the forgotten commodity of that group, in my opinion, for all the reasons that Keith just talked about. Yep. I am going to play Cantlay for DFS. I tried to figure out a way to put him on my outright card. I do think that, if you go backwards 2 years in time and you look at Cantlay versus Xander, I think most people in the space, and I know Xander has made the move. He's pulled away from his father. He's taken his career in his hands. I do think he's a better golfer than Patrick Cantlay is right now. But move this back 2 years ago. I mean, we'd give a different answer, right? Like, we would probably have all come on the show and said Patrick Cantlay is a better golfer than Xander Schauffele, even if they're really close. Cantlay's going to get this together again at some point, and we're starting to see bits and pieces of it over the last couple months. So I like any of those 4 players that I've talked about. They are all going to be on DFS builds for me. I'm going to build heavily with those 4 names. Cray is going to be Brooks Koepka. I always see in these spots like late, everybody gets this. Well, what if Koepka's ownership is too low? What if Koepka's outright price is too high? And you end up getting more ownership and people think they have more playability on him than they actually do in these spots. I'm typically fine letting Brooks Koepka beat me. I'm going to let Brooks Koepka beat me here if he does.
I love it. I think we got some very differing opinions in the DFS world here, boys, because, you know, Patrick Cantlay for me is ranked, I've got him ranked 28th. He's ranked 11th in DFS, you know. So, Keith, to get back to your point about John Rahm, that's where I'll be playing John Rahm as my I'm not going to play Cantlay and Rahm in the same lineup because I just don't like it. You know what I'm saying? So that's my situation there, along with Tyrrell Hatton. They can both get a double serving of Cray for me. I just don't think Tyrrell's got the upside in majors that we're looking for, but he's showing a bit lately. My gourmet play will be Victor Hovland. If he can ball strike the crap out of it this week, his short game potentially could completely be eliminated, and you'll have a few chips here and there. And I think the weather over the weekend might turn into a bit of a birdie type situation where you got to just keep rattling off birdies. And if he makes the cut, I love his chances. So got him ranked 9th. His DFS rankings 8th. You know, I'm okay with that. I'm assuming he will be lower owned with the people around him playing a lot better. In the 8s, some fun guys: Cameron Smith, Tony Finau, Hideki, Tom Kim, Shane Lowry, Matt Fitzpatrick, and the 2 years ago US Open champion Wyndham Clark. Spencer, I'll start with you in the 8s. Gourmet or Cray?
Cameron Smith is going to be my gourmet for all the reasons that I talked about. He's been such a public darling through every single major this year and has disappointed in the mind of the public to where I think we're going to get too large of an overcorrection here for, you could maybe make an argument that the Masters is equally, if not better of a major just because of how wide open those fairways are versus here. Smith does have an inability, even at his best, to locate the short grass. I trust his short game enough here, more so with the way that this facility is built. I trust his short irons enough to where I don't think we're going to get that same sort of a finish that we got at the US Open. I think this is going to be a much more typical Cameron Smith Open Championship. Look at what he's done. Even, I mean, if you look at the last 4 years, like, yeah, there's the victory, which isn't necessarily going to be the most ideal course fit to this one, much more wide open facility. But even still at the other ones, I mean, top 33, I think Cameron Smith's, we always say, Byron, and Cantlay has this to his game too. When there is stink attached to a player that people feel like they've gotten burnt on over and over again. And the problem with Cameron Smith is he is just not playing enough. Like we only see him in the major championships. And there's been a lot of situations where Cameron Smith has been this price and he's disappointed in the mind of the public. And we haven't gotten the finish that we wanted. I think this is a really nice buyback opportunity on him. So he'll be my gourmet. I don't necessarily have a massive take here of a player that I am just completely out on. There's high upside answers for a Hideki who's going to be probably more volatile than anybody in this range, but I like the upside that he possesses for this course. I guess my one concern where I'm different than at least Keith here, I don't know where you stand on this, Byron. I think Finau is probably more of like a cash game play for me than he would be a GPP target. Some of the negative trajectory marks for upside worry me a little bit for a golfer that I think is going to be popular, but inside of the top 10 for safety. So like you also have that answer thrown into the mix. It's really hard for me to find a name here and tell you this is the player that like, I don't want anybody to play this week. I don't think we have that option here necessarily.
Keith?
Yeah, you know, I would have to echo that from Spencer. I mean, this is an interesting group. The guy that I would say is the most cray-cray for me would be Fitzpatrick. I mean, this is a championship. We would think that with his scrambling ability and his ball striking and what led him to winning at TCC a couple of years ago, we all wished we'd seen more of this. And I'm not sure if he's injury-ridden or what it has, but the last 2 years have been kind of mediocre when it comes down to it. And I think we would all honestly agree with that. But But then again, he may not be that popular to even worry about him at cray. I think for me on the other end, the Gourmet, I love Finau's fit this week. I ran to the window as soon as I could get the number as high as it was on a Monday. I wrote a Golf Digest article about going after him when, we do a Monday article every week on the odds drop on who is the guy you should just grab the quickest. And I think Hideki is a very interesting play. And I think that his base level or his floor is so good in major championships that you won't get hurt, but he has a great ceiling there and an opportunity to do something special. So I think that when you surround yourself with a lot of Tom Kims and Wyndham Clarks and such, you're surrounding yourself with a lot of hope, and hope is not an action verb when it comes to major championships, right? So I think that's where I'd go with that conversation.
Okay. I respect all of that. I'm going to go with Wyndham Clark as I have bet him at 40-1 or 80-1, 80-1, but I don't think I'll be playing him at $8,000. I don't know how owned he's going to be, but I think everyone's going to be thinking he's a sneaky option. And after the surge he had on Sunday, kind of get it together. When he sprays it, So I don't know how many gauze bushes he's going to be able to have to kind of hack his way through this week. But at 80-1, I took a gamble on the upside. I'm kind of looking for a bit more safety in this department still. He's my cray option, and my gourmet pick is going to be Tom Kim at $8,300. I just love what this guy gets up to in majors, man. And his driver, I think, will keep him safe. And his iron play has been scintillating at times. He's dropped the ball on Sundays in majors lately, but I'm hoping at the Open Championship, where he likely has played the majority of his golf on international soil, Tom Kim can get it done for us at $8,300. At $7,800, I'm going to go with a double cray. Jordan Spieth, Joaquin Niemann, not interested in either. Joaquin Niemann, I know everyone's all up in his, happies about what he can get up to, and he's playing great golf on LIV. His best major finish with how well he has played in his career is a top 16 at Augusta. That's it. He doesn't have a top 10 in a major. Maybe this is the week. There's always a week someone does something, but I'm not buying the hype on Joaquin, who I will be playing in this range, Aaron Rai. I think he's just super safe. $7,300 in the fairway on the greens, make your putts. Off we go. I think he can do that on rinse and repeat central. So those are my two options there. Spence, go ahead, and then knock out Keith afterwards.
Let me just ask you this, Byron. And I know we talk about movement, and movement's not the ultimate decider in these spots. If you look at Joaquin Niemann's matchups, he is minus 138 against Adam Scott. He is minus 120 against Finau. He is minus 125 against Oosthuizen. Does any of that worry you that a lot of the sharp money has hit him very early in the week, even in the outright market? And by the way, I asked this question not as somebody who overly loves Joaquin Niemann myself. This isn't me asking this with a hidden agenda of telling you all the reasons why he's good. I'm just genuinely curious of your thoughts there.
Sure. I think matchups, you're looking for more safety than upside, really, at the majority of the time, which he does provide you. The T16 finish is going to be good enough to potentially beat the majority of those guys if they have an average round, or an average tournament. We're looking for DFS. We're looking to be the best lineup out of 130,000. I don't think Niemann's going to be the guy that's going to find himself in the optimal lineup because of his lack of upside in majors yet. I understand maybe bet him top 20, something like that if you're in the mood, but a top 5, top 10 bet on him is pushing it for me, in my opinion.
That's fair. To answer the question, though, that was initially asked, Aaron Rai is going to be popular. I think he's very safe for all the reasons you talked about. For a cash game play, he's probably one of my favorite plays on the board. If you want to go the boom or bust route with this, and I bet him at 135-1 when it opened today, which bet him every major championship, Alex Noren. That's the boom or bust selection for me. So I like Noren's ability. I'd like to see where the ownership ends up landing if we get into this really chalky filled Alex Noren return, which, there was a couple years back, and I've told you the story before, Byron. I went on the show with Chad Millman and Simon Hunter over at Action Network. And they asked me, who is my favorite sleeper darling in this tournament? I gave Alex Noren off on that show, and his ownership ended up skyrocketing. And he didn't just miss the cut. He came in dead last place, pretty much with it. So I haven't had the best track record with Noren. But I think this is the ideal sort of a setup that you're looking for with him at low enough ownership. I have the outright ticket. I'll play him in GPPs. I'll bet him in the high upside, highly volatile markets there.
As we toss it to Keith, I think Alex Noren making it in on the final go at the Scottish. A lot of content pumped out before the Scottish concluded. Doesn't have any Alex Noren in it. And I love guys that come in late because they're usually low-owned.
Jaeger at the PGA Championship, maybe? I don't know what major it was, but there was a situation with Jaeger where he got in late.
Yeah.
Whichever one that ended up being, and Jaeger came in with absolutely no ownership based off of that.
Yeah, that's a little hack.
Little known fact there, Byron. Joaquin Niemann never finished better than 53rd in the Open Championship in 4 starts. Just throwing that out there. The cray for me is tougher than Gourmet. Gourmet for me is Cam Young. He has proven himself to be an excellent ball striker. He's definitely back in form. I was walking with him during the. I mean, is there a golfer alive that could shoot sub 60 and make that this highest score of the day and lose strokes putting on the whole back 9? I mean, how is that even possible?
Say that again.
So I was walking with him that Saturday at the Travelers, right?
Yeah.
He shoots sub 60. He shoots 59, right? That was the worst score he could have shot that day, including the hole out. But still, that was like the highest number he could have shot because he lost strokes putting on his back 9 total. Think about that, right?
That's floor, baby.
And I tell you what, he's back to that level of like, even though this is DFS, so we're not picking guys to win. We're picking guys to show up, right? Guys that could like just do a lot. I mean, he could seriously pop here because he did it at Travelers. He's done it at Rocket. He's back in that mode where he's very confident in his ball striking. So he's going to play aggressively. And I love that in DFS. So he's going to be my Gourmet down there. And at 7,500, I mean, like that's
almost cray pricing.
Yeah. I mean, that's like ordering mozzarella sticks for starter and like, the chef throwing you 2 extra ones for whatever it is, $6.99. I mean,
with a few, curly fries at Arby's show up. Sometimes you order normal fries, you get a curly in there by accident. I think that's Cam Young for you.
Yeah, definitely this week. And on the cray side, man, I so want to say Jordan Spieth, even in the face of his Open Championship record. It just continues to be a very, very sad story. I mean, he makes Rory's putting over the last 3 holes at Pinehurst look positive right now. I mean, it's unbelievable what that poor guy's chasing. And I hate to say that because as somebody that makes a living off of golf being popular, after Tiger, Jordan is by far the one that moves the needle the most when I'm out there. 1,000%. You can say what you want about Scotty and Rory and everything. It is everyone goes nuts for Jordan if Tiger's not around, right? He is by far the most popular guy and everybody loves him. I love him and everything, but you hate to see this guy struggle because he really helps golf become more popular. But it's pretty crazy. I mean, that guy down sub 8 right now, and probably should be even lower, is really, really interesting. So he's my cray.
He was the reason I didn't have any space to watch Davis Thompson make the winning putt on 18 because all the people to watch Jordan Spieth on Sunday at the John Deere were there. Like he was the reason that place was packed because they weren't there for Davis Thompson. They were there to watch Jordan Spieth shoot over par at the John Deere on a Sunday. Tough scenes for old Geordie. In the 6s, gentlemen, you cannot say Sung J M because he is an egregious misprice at $6,900 in my opinion. I will not be playing him because he's going to be very, very popular. And we saw what he did at Brookline when he was mispriced. So, Mr. Stewart, hit us with your Gourmet and crays in the 6s.
Ooh.
And if you have to think about it, we can pass the baton to Spencer in the meantime.
I want to think about it for a second.
Okay.
So this was put in the chat, and I didn't see who did it, but one of the things, and this is a very important discussion to be had, is it's understanding the difference between good chalk and bad chalk. When you look at Robert McIntyre last week, Robert McIntyre was underpriced and very popular. And I think last minute, a lot of people got off of him for that reason there. And I ended up writing in the Rotoballer Roundtable that we do, Byron, that he was my favorite GPP play, regardless of the ownership. for all the upside answers that he possessed. So I think you have to be able to differentiate between those two qualities, because just because you're popular doesn't mean you're a bad play. A lot of times the most popular players are some of the best plays on the board for all the reasons that you talked about with Sungjae. If I can't pick Sungjae and we're not going to go down that route here, I guess I'll say Louis Oosthuizen. Like, there was a lot that my model liked about him. I don't know. I have a bad feeling he might also be very popular, but like, for me, this is just a golfer who's in form. Yeah, it's just a mispricing for everything that he's produced lately. Like, go look at what he has actually put together. It's quite eye-popping right now.
I've got him ranked 11th, so I'll agree with you.
Yeah, he's in his last 8 starts, he's got 6 top 12s, and the only place he's missed the cut has been majors, right?
Yeah.
You missed the PGA, you missed the US Open, but everything else has been a top 12, and he was 4th over the weekend.
And these kind of venues are his baby, man. He's obviously the only tournament he's won on the PGA Tour is the Open Championship. So.
Yeah.
All right, Keith. 6s.
Gourmet. I'm going to go with Adam Scott. I think you need to be an incredible driver of the golf ball, and I love the way he wields that long putter over there on those slow greens. I think that's an incredible advantage, and if you want to throw a little recency bias on that, that's fine. But I was thinking about Adam Scott long before Robbie McIntyre started digging out sprinkler heads in the hay, if you want to go there. My cray is going to be Ricky Fowler, because he's up there with Jordan Spieth. I mean, there's a lot of crays I could pick here, but I guess I'll pick on Ricky. So there you go.
Very, very warranted cray. Just completely ejected himself out of any contention after he won at the Rocket Mortgage. Disgusting play. Like, he's just not been the same. That putt took his soul, essentially, in my opinion. All will to win left his body that day. I'm going to go with a double serving of gourmet here with Davis Thompson and Russell Henley. But I'll say Russell Henley as my absolute favorite here. If not Louis, I have Louis 11th. I have Russell Henley here at 20th. So Russell, if you think about guys that don't have distance but accuracy off the tee to avoid those bunkers, he's it. And his short game has been firing lately, and he's been popping up on leaderboards at majors. So I love Russell Henley at a little venue like this at $6,700. And then, I'll go with Ricky Fowler. I'll go with him as my cray situation in this department.
There's a lot of really interesting plays. And this is when we talk about it being soft major championship pricing. This is exactly what you get when you look at Louis, Sungjae, Thompson, Henley. My model liked Bezaid and Howdett, liked Adam Scott for all the reasons Keith talked about. The 2 names, and I don't know how popular they're going to be. One is not going to shock anybody, because this is a golfer that him and I used to be very close in, Jason Day. I do think he is too cheap at 6,900. The other one that I am very curious to see where the ownership ends up landing, I ended up fading him last week, and it was one of those situations, Byron, where I had Alexander Bjork over Billy Horschel at plus 150, and it went miscut. And I ended up being on the wrong side of that by fading Horschel in that spot. For all the reasons why I didn't like Horschel last week, are some of the reasons why I like him this week. I think off of that miscut, we can get an interesting opportunity to jump back in on Billy Horschel. My model had him outside the top 60 at that tournament. Has him inside the top 35 here in a stronger field. So I will be playing Billy Horschel for this event.
Keith, any other guys you want to just rattle off the top of your head, some names before we get into the 5s?
In the 6s that I like, certainly Sungjae. We've beat that. Siwoo Kim, when it's an accuracy contest off the tee, I mean, there's just nobody better. And he's the type of guy. And you know what? We were touching upon this a little bit earlier. We were looking for comp courses and everything. And when you start to take a golf course that becomes this strategic and becomes this target oriented, then you have to consider places or guys that have always played good at the Players. Goes back to, the way you guys feel about Cam Smith playing here. You're going to say, everyone's going to say like, oh, well, the driver's got to be in play. Well, I mean, he went to one of the most demanding driver courses of all time, and he won. And, I still think that holds a lot of weight when it comes to other places in similar situations. And there's a lot of places here where he won't use the driver, but his savvy with the short game and his ability to score far outweighs missing 2 or 3 fairways, even badly around. And sure, if this thing gets to 16 or 17 under, he's probably not a thoroughbred horse for that race. But if this thing stays around a dozen, then that guy is super, super live. And I love to bet Cam Smith. I've just gotten tired of it this year, but I'll be back on that horse at some time. And, I think that Siwoo Kim down there for me, definitely Louis. Those are all gourmet names for me down there. And I don't disagree whatsoever with Billy Horschel. Billy Horschel takes time every September to go over and play in the BMW. He loves to come over to Europe and play golf. He's one of the few guys that does that, plays a lot of the Dubai events and everything. So he doesn't mind the travel, and he likes the challenge of coming over here and being a good ball striker. So, and he's a great scrambler and scorer. So there you go.
Let's go. I love it. Some names I'll mention: Tom Hoagie, Eric Cole, Victor Perez, and that'll be Lucas Glover at $6,000 as well, as someone that checks out quite nicely for me in the sixes. To start off the fives, I'll go first. Brendan Todd. And it's not a model play. This is a maniac play. $5,900. He's going to hit every drive short of any bunker that could be in his way. And then he's got one of the best short games. Simple. That's my guy. I'll think about my cray once we roll through you two. Spencer in the fives.
Cray-cray's obviously a lot more difficult when we're talking about $5,000 golfers to begin with. So every single weekend, it's in my Rotoballer article if you want to see the entire list of names. I always take all the golfers in my sheet. I'll put a little threshold in it to eliminate anybody who doesn't fit that requirement of the top 65 players for all the categories that I've run that week. Sometimes I add a secondary qualifier where you need to have a top 10 in one of those 6 or 7 categories. But this week I didn't. I just took golfers to land in the top 65 of all 6 categories that I ran. It's going to produce all your big name players that you're talking about. But there were 2 golfers in this $5,000 section. One got ranked 42nd overall. One got ranked 62nd overall. So, these are not necessarily foregone conclusions of finding success, but the one option, Byron, is who you talked about in Brendan Todd at 5,900. The other one, I know the form has gone south recently. Todd has a little bit more upside than this golfer as far as some of these marks, but I also kind of like Mackenzie Hughes, a top 6 finish in Open in the past, and 25th for me when you look at weighted scrambling for this course, and nothing else that landed outside of the top 52. So a lot of consistent results for a player that I do think has hidden, if you can find a bet on him to make the cut, great, but I do think he has hidden top 30 potential for this tournament also.
I love it. Go for it, Keith.
All right. I've got 2 gourmets I'm going to go over because the cray list, we'd be here all night.
Yeah.
From the gourmet land, the first one I'm going to go with is Ben Griffin. He's been playing great lately, especially on Sundays. When we start to factor in scoring potential in and around the green, and a guy that just puts the ball in play lately and absolutely is playing way above whatever anyone would have thought his ceiling would have been over the last 6 weeks. Ben Griffin is one of those people. And I was surprised. I thought he would be in the low 6s, but to see him down in the 5s to me I thought was a nice value. And then the other guy I'm going to go with is a DP World Tour name that goes back to the European Tour days because he was a kid. The youngest person ever to win the British Amateur at 16 years old, Matteo Manassero, right? This guy has been playing really good. Like, he resurrected his game. And if we love Rory's revisionist story, right? Like, then you got this guy's last 4 starts, a 7th, a 10th, right? A 47th and a 15th there at the Scottish, right? And it's a little bit of Band-Aids, but this guy's in the 5K, right? He's gaining positively strokes on average, 3 out of the last 4 weeks. And he's making cuts, and he's been good this year on the DP World Tour. And there's no doubt that he could handle a larger stage. So for me, I take a lot of pride in finding guys down here, right? I do a lot of shows with Wiley over at Run Pure Sports, and I always come up with guys. The week of Colonial, I picked Davis Riley, right? I said, hey, I think this is a good guy down here. I think that what I've seen out on tour, he went back to Jeff Smith, Radar Golf, as his instructor. It's been like over a month. I think this guy could make the cut as a 5K golfer. We all know what happened, but like, the point being is that, like, when you spend enough time out there and you watch these guys and you see their practices, or you're paying attention to the way the trends work, like you guys do so in-depthly, I think that Manacero and I think that Ben Griffin makes some sense here. And if you need to balance out a Scotty or a Rory and one other big name, I think both of those guys give you a very, very solid chance to come in the top 50 in this tournament.
Yes, I love that pick, Keith. And one of my guys that I'll be choosing has been playing on tour for as long as Matteo Manacero has been alive, and that's Stuart Sink.
Oh.
So I think as a reigning Open champion, at $5,600, the guy's, whatever, we'll see what he can get up to. Maybe he feels comfortable on an Open Championship course. $5,100. Ernie Els, if you're looking for a complete cut maker, maybe at $5,100. He just won a major on the senior tour last week, and unlike Bobby Luck Sakantire, went ahead and flew straight to the Open Championship, left the party behind. Bobby's since had 7 whiskeys out of the Scottish Open trophy, and we'll see how he plays this week. But I'm a big fan of Ernie this week, as always. And then Austin Eckert, a little surprise candidate as well, at $5,700. He's kind of sneaky for me in that realm. So, folks,
there you go.
Can kind of wind down now, get out of the show. We nailed everything. I feel like we did well. We gave so much good information, and this might be one of the shorter shows we've actually done. So it's an hour 35, but we're still very, very impressed with what we got up to today. And Keith, thank you so much for showing up with us. Did you do all 4, or did we just do the 3 to end?
The 3 to end.
Okay, perfect. We'll make sure it's 4 next year. Don't you worry. But tell the people what's going on in your life, and please do not leave anything on the table.
Well, you can always find me at Golf Digest all week. Read the Line. We have a nice partnership with them. And I write a ton of their betting content, including the power rankings this week, which were, delivered this morning to everyone. If you don't agree with the rankings, they're just a wonderful reference tool. You're going to find in there odds, data golf rankings, official world golf rankings, the people's performance in the 3 majors this year, as well as, I designed them to be a reference tool for everyone like us to use, or even the novices to try to win their neighborhood pool. You'll also see me on Sports Grid all week. If you're not familiar with that, it's a fast channel. It's 24/7 sports betting. I'm their golf guy, and amongst a couple other really, really sharp guys over there like Brady Cannon and Mike Carver and Cam Stewart. So we have fun there, and always there's Read the Line. Go to readtheline.com, subscribe. You'll see all sorts of fun content there on the website, and you'll get the newsletter for the LPGA, which is playing this week over in Toledo, all the way from Evian, France to Toledo. I don't know who makes that schedule up, but you want cray-cray. That's cray-cray. And certainly, of course, there'll be something on the Open Championship, all delivered to your inbox on Wednesday morning around 9 a.m. Eastern time.
Thank you so much for all that you do for the sports golfing world, Mr. Stewart. Spencer, get us out of here, my friend.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, Keith, thank you for coming on this show. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations with you. You can find me on Twitter at @TeeOffSports. We're going to be producing a ton of content on the website, Byron. Like, between everything that we have going on, Joe Idoni, Joe Nicely, the entire team is going to be producing all their work. So if you want my model, if you want Byron's model, it's about the best time of the year to sign up. I believe you can quote me if I'm wrong on this, Byron. I probably should have this answer, but I think you can get 30% off right now
with code SUMMER. I believe Perfect. That is correct. Yes. But if you want to support me and Spencer, you can put a few more bucks in your pocket. Use code MANIAC or code TEEOFF. It'll only get you 10%, but it'll definitely help us to more than the Rotoballer family. But whatever, we're just being a little greedy at the end of the show. Yeah. Folks, thank you so much. Hit the like button on the way out. Please subscribe to the Rotoballer Fantasy Network, and don't feel shy to subscribe to our stuff over there. We give you everything. This show is basically what you're going to get over at rotoballer.com. So that's exactly what we love to do. We pride ourselves on what we bring, and we will be here for the 3M next week. Catch you guys then. Good luck and have some fun this week.